Hi, welcome back. My name is Jordan Clark, and this is the fourth and final video in my Art Journaling 101 workshop. Today's video is a really fun one because I'm showing you an easy way to play with pattern in your art journal. I'm bringing back gouache for this video, and we're going to be painting a few simple designs on little squares of paper. You can then take these squares and arrange them like tiles to create beautiful repeating patterns. You can make your finished artwork any size by just using more or less of these little tiles. Now, there are a lot of different ways that you can use these patterns. You could glue the tiles directly on a page in your art journal. You could put them on the blank greeting cards or postcards that we used earlier in this workshop. Or you could make a piece of art by arranging the tiles on a bigger piece of paper that can then be framed or hung on the wall. So feel free to customize this to make whatever you'd like. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through every step to create these tile patterns. We'll start by sketching the designs. I'll show you how to mix the paint colors, and then we'll paint the designs on our little squares of paper. I'm going to show you 4 simple designs in this video, but if you feel inspired, I encourage you to dream up even more doodles that you can use to create your own unique patterns. So let's go over the supplies that you'll need for this video. For this project, we're using Strathmore Bristol paper, which is a nice heavyweight paper with a smooth surface. It's great for gouache because it holds up really well to the paint without any buckling, and the gouache applies really nicely to this smooth surface. You'll also need the Maimeri primary set of gouache, the Strathmore visual journal if you decide to do this project in your art journal, a round number 3 paintbrush. This one is a Velvetouch brush by Princeton. A few colored pencils. I'm using Rembrandt Polycolor pencils by Lyra. A ruler. A paint palette. A pair of scissors. A drawing pencil. A glue stick. And a cup of water. So let's get started. Grab a piece of paper. I'm using the Bristol paper here and a pencil, and we're going to start with some sketches of the patterns that we'll be painting. So for the first one, start by drawing a slightly curved line and add a few shorter lines coming off of that. We're going to make this a flower stem by adding these simple shapes to the ends of the lines to look like little blooms. Then fill in the extra space on the stem with some tiny leaves, and that's it for our first design. Next, we're going to sketch another simple flower. Start with a line that curves like this. Then draw a loose blob shape for the flower. Add some small leaves coming off of the base of the flower. And then quickly sketch in a few squiggles to represent the petals. Then make the stem a little bit wider and add some leaves coming off of it. And that's it for the second design. This one is a little rose stem. We're going to do one more simple flower design. Start with a slightly curved line and add a shape like this to the top. Then add another line and a flower bud coming off of the stem. Add the details to the center of the flowers. Finally, finish it off by adding some leaves to the stem. These flower sketches are super simple, but once we add paint, you'll see how they come to life. The last pattern that we'll paint is so easy, it doesn't really need any instruction. I'm just going to quickly sketch some stars. And that's it. These are the 4 patterns that we'll be painting. Now let's prepare the paper that we'll be painting on. Grab a piece of Bristol paper, and we're going to cut this up into square tiles. You'll need your ruler for this, and on one side of the paper, make marks at 2-inch increments. It should look like this. Then turn your paper, and on the perpendicular side, make more marks at 2-inch increments on the top and on the bottom. Then use your ruler and the tick marks as reference to draw straight lines across the paper. I turn my ruler upside down because this makes it lay completely flat so I can get a precise line. Now turn the paper again, and we're going to follow the same placement as those first marks we made to add in more marks in 2-inch increments on the last line that we drew. Then use your ruler once again to connect these marks and draw straight lines. In the end, you should have a group of precise 2-inch squares. Use your scissors to cut these out. You can make as many squares as you would like to paint. We're going to arrange these into our pattern, so the more squares you have, the bigger your pattern will be. Next, let's mix our paint colors. Start by squeezing out a little bit of cyan, magenta, and yellow onto your paint palette. Then add white to one of the wells. First, we're going to make a light pink by mixing dots of magenta and yellow into the white until it's reached the perfect shade. Once you have the color you like, use your paintbrush to add some water to the paint. You want to add water until the paint reaches the consistency of melted ice cream. If you add too much, the paint will become transparent, but if you add just enough, it should brush really smoothly onto the paper. Next, we'll make a pale blue by adding cyan to the white, and then a tiny bit of yellow and magenta. You can add more yellow if you want this to be a blue-green shade, or you can add more magenta if you would like it to be more of a purple blue. And then once again, add some water until the paint reaches the perfect consistency. Next, we'll make a mustard yellow. Start with a base of yellow, and then add a little bit of magenta. I ended up adding just a bit too much magenta here and it turned too orange, so I added more yellow to balance that out. Then add a tiny bit of cyan, and you should have a nice mustard shade. Finish it off by mixing in some water. Next, I want to make a deep red color. Start with a base of magenta and add just a tiny bit of yellow and then some cyan. Make sure to mix in some water as well. The next color is going to be an earthy green. Start with a base of yellow and then add cyan to turn this green. Add tiny amounts of magenta to make this more of a brown green. And then mix some water into the paint. And finally, the last color is going to be a warm gray. Start with a base of white, and then I added black to my palette, and I dipped my brush into it to add just a tiny amount to the white. Then add small amounts of magenta and yellow to make this color warmer. If you want it to be a darker gray, just add a bit more black. And then finish it off by mixing in some water. And here's our palette of colors that we'll use to paint the patterns. Now, grab a piece of scrap Bristol paper, and we're going to practice the pattern designs before we actually paint our tiles. I used one of the squares we cut out to trace 4 boxes on my paper. Keep your pattern sketches nearby for reference. I'm going to start by filling in the squares with different colors for the background of the patterns. You can copy the colors I did, or feel free to mix it up and paint the background whatever color you'd like. I did 2 squares in pink, 1 in light blue, and 1 in gray. Let this dry completely before you continue painting. Now we're going to paint the designs. For the first flower, take your green and paint a curved line. Then add smaller lines coming off of it. Then take some yellow on your brush and add flowers to the ends of the lines. Just a few quick brush strokes create this simple flower shape. Then pick up the green again and fill in the spaces on the stem with small brush strokes to create leaves. Finally, take some dark red on your brush and add a few small strokes to the base of the flower shapes. Let this dry completely, and we will add more details later with colored pencils. We'll move on to the next design and start by picking up some green on our brush. Then draw a curved line with a smaller line coming off of it, and some wider brush strokes for leaves. Then pick up some light pink and make short, wide brush strokes to create the flower shape. There's no need to be perfect here, you're just kind of creating a blob shape. Then pick up some red and add this in short lines to the base of the flowers, and let this dry. For the next design, use your green to paint a curved line like this. Then add short stems coming off of it with leaves on the end. Then take some red. I ended up needing to mix in a little bit more water into mine, and then paint a blob shape for the flower. Use green to add tiny brush strokes for the leaves at the base of the flower. And finally, the last design is our simple star pattern. Use any colors you want to paint an array of stars across one of your squares. And here are our painted designs. Let this dry completely, and then we need to add in a few more details with colored pencils. I'm using orange, red, and green, but you can use any colors you want for this. Starting with the first design, I'm using orange to draw a dashed line around the border of the square. For the next design, I'm using dark green to trace the stem and add lines to the leaves. Then I'm using red to add a scalloped border around the square. For the third flower, I'm using green to shade in half of the leaves and add a border to the stem. Then I tried to use my red colored pencil to add details to the flower, but it ended up being too light, so then I took the green instead, and this worked really well. I just did a few squiggles to add some definition to the flower. And here are our finished tile patterns. Once you've practiced your patterns, it's time to paint them on the paper squares. I find it easiest to do this process in batches instead of painting the patterns one by one, so I start by just painting the background color on all the squares so they can sit and dry before I paint the designs. Just like with the practice designs, I'm painting the squares pink, blue, and gray. When you're finished painting, set these aside and let them dry completely before moving on to the next step. Now it's time to paint your different designs on each square. You can follow my instruction from the practice squares we did, or try your own original designs. I really love painting flowers because they're fun and easy, and there are so many different variations that you can do, but the options here are really endless. If you need pattern inspiration, you could go into your closet and copy some of the patterns from the fabric of your clothes or your linens. And you could also take inspiration from vintage china or tea sets that usually have beautiful floral and nature-inspired designs. So take a look around you and see what you can be inspired by. Spend some time sketching pattern ideas in your art journal and then try them out for this project. When you're all finished painting your designs, let them dry, and you should have a stack of these painted squares. The last step of this process is just to use your colored pencils to add the final details. And now that we have a collection of these beautiful paper tiles, it's time to turn them into a larger piece of art. Grab a piece of Bristol paper and start arranging the tiles in any pattern you'd like. You can fill the whole page, or you can leave a border and make a square like I did. Feel free to also add these to the blank greeting cards or postcards that we used in past videos from this workshop. Finally, use some glue to adhere all the tiles to your page. When you're finished, trim the edges of the paper if you'd like, and you have this beautiful piece of art. And just a quick tip, if you have any extra tiles like I did, pull out your art journal and fill a page with the patterns. That's it for this video. I hope that you had fun playing with gouache and trying out this technique to make tiled patterns. I love this project because it's so simple, but the outcome is really beautiful, and there's basically infinite possibilities for the patterns that you can create. So you can try this again and again and have a different piece of art each time. Thank you so much for joining me for my Art Journaling 101 workshop. I really hope that the projects that I shared in these 4 videos inspire you to pull out your art supplies and just start creating. The best way to improve your skills as an artist is by having a regular practice where you can just play and not be worried about the outcome or making a perfect piece of art. So go grab your art journal, pick up a pencil or a paintbrush, get your hands messy, and make some art. If you're interested, you can find me, Jordan Clark, on YouTube or Instagram for some more art inspiration.